rises in the three worlds, winner of the breast, supreme guide, to you I bow. With the supreme signs, face like the spotless moon, color like gold, to you I bow. You are immaculate, the three worlds are not incomparable, wise one, to you I bow. Great compassionate protector, all-knowing teacher, field of merit and good qualities, vast as to the Tathagata I bow. Through purity, attachment from the lower realms, unique, supreme, ultimate reality, to the Dharma that is peace I bow. Having freed themselves, showing the path of freedom to established in the trainings, the holy field endowed with good qualities, to the Sangha I bow. Do not commit any non-virtuous actions, perform all virtuous actions. Subdue your mind completely. This is the teaching of the Buddha. A star, mirage, a flame in a lamp, an illusion, a drop of dew, a bubble, a dream, a flash of lightning, a cloud, see conditioned things as such. Through this merit may sentient beings attain the state of all things, subdue the fall, be delivered from the ocean of cyclic existence perturbed by sub-aging, sickness, death. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn among Meru, foreland, sun and moon, imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you. May all beings enjoy this pure land. Venerable holy gurus, in the space of your truth body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love, let fall the rain of the profound and extensive Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Idam Guru Randa Mandalakam Niryatayami. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create, by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings.
The Dick song again.
Oh yeah. The number test. Better. Lots of it.
Lots of the kapshala.
Oh, that is. Oh yeah. This one. Oh, there. Oh, Tilikasha. Geshe Chimbushua lesson, Juju labor. Oh, Tilikasha. Keba Tumar Ragun Zeba, he said. Keba Tumar Ragun Zeba, Tuanam Jindini Peppersi. Then it's semi give saw them to Tesho Telani to Tobashi, Artira. Oh, Tilikasha. Keba Tumar Ragun Zeba is. Jidenji come charge, Jishi at the Keba Mambo. And Ringlaya, Simje Tamjalia, and the Pembe, showed the Cuba the Kanye, Yamdo, rub the caution. Simba Jabba Namjese, what I gave out to my Rakun Jabba. To be on Namjese. The Ni Pemba Six, Chanju showed the same Kiba Dini. ane simje tamjala pembe chodo chube tabi basi yusyara. Tunga namjin dinyi pembar si yusya. Dini tseme kiwi so namje tesho tela nidu tobar si yusya. Dini chanchugu sem dinyi kisi wara. Chamba da nyingji la shi chana ane simje tamje gatodo. Dini truptunga sanje ji koban tobar chawo nyambe samba sangbote. Diki sunu dini tseme bese, rang mebe. Dini tseme kiwi so namje tesho tela nidu tobar si yusya. Tseme be kiwi so namje. Dewe cho ngele tarwa da tamje chimba nipu de isi wara. Tela nidu tobar chi isi de le labo chene si wara. Kale lui jitini ka sura. Menga temba la soba rwa. Ane chi se che wala soba. Tra pe wala soba si. Tra tu su to chi tinde chi widwa. Lui la kale chene. O tinde kale che wala te me guba. Rwa. Samikyo tesho tela nidu tobar chi isi. Te nga ne. 대화네 남 대화네 레부 대화리야 ene tobarchigri esodo techo telanya do tobarchis oya tichulano.
So, as the great Bodhisattva Shantideva has stated in his Way of the Bodhisattva, for many eons deeply pondering, the mighty sages saw its benefits, whereby unnumbered multitude are brought to with ease to supreme joy. So here, having contemplated, pondered deeply for eons, so thinking about the system of the world coming into being, abiding, and being destroyed, having contemplated through countless eons like that, the sages, the mighty sages, have seen the benefits of this attitude of bodhicitta, seeing that this is the method by which unnumbered multitudes are brought with ease to supreme joy. So here, these beings who are contemplating the way in which to achieve this kind of highest benefit, having contemplated for eons, see that it is this mind, this attitude of bodhicitta, seeing its benefits in that, again, whereby unnumbered multitudes are brought with ease to supreme joy. So this kind of a path is something by which one is able to lead countless beings. It has kind of an immeasurable sort of a benefit, able to benefit and bring to supreme joy immeasurable beings without the kind of great difficulties. I mean, in some traditions, we see relying upon the instructions of teachers to sort of like remove every single one of your hairs or engage in extreme fasting as kind of austerities to supposedly purify the body. But here, without that kind of difficulty, by generating this attitude of bodhicitta, one is able to go on this path of ease or goodness to bring about goodness as well, the highest happiness for all sentient beings.
오야 제인데 데네 대화를 좋아라 섬이 수시 기록 유르성부도 람 대화네 아니 대부 대화 토에 tel야 아니 섬이 섬단 덴발로든 덴바시네 기록 봐서 레로체네 파 대용삼메도 삼스타 테데 용고 마르세 기록 봐 용고 마르세 거다 데네 대화를 좋아라 섬이 수시 기록 유르성부도 데인데 가서오라 남바게 다치 chanchu semba namje keba mangbo ane su namda shiji so ne sanje ji koban tokbo re se de chichi de kale khabu re shibu che tha tende mangbo kale kyab ko ne samsanga ra de le sam kitwa ina chanchu semba so ke keba mangbo le kale kyab de kese chanchu semba cheba la labete chimba chudun seba la soba tuzu labete kale churgu yo maro kawen dushi ji chena keba mambu lobala sobo tende simshu yoen yo mare chera kale samlo kogo yo mare cheda nganzu der ba ko keba mambu mo kare na mazo je te der apete thoma me bane tanda kewala ji der tanda ma bana dus der wa ta ko je der tunga nya je te ne te ne re dora ta keba mambu sunam je so sa na sanje ji ko ba to sibi kale khanda de chore yo marwa chanchu sembalaya tene tewe doshi ki shendun la tsamba mayina ane tende simshu kora yontoya yo marwa tewe doshi ki tene tewa roa la sikdwa o ti indi ko kasura o ti 대외 도시 전이야. 소수 던다 남주 소수 던다 주발라 깔래 sork 말와. 어디나시 현재 던 주에도 소수 깔래 소수 던다 주발 나신 le lagwa songyoara namju soso tanda trubale lagwa samlu thone songyoara tejde ko kale khana da chik tende yongyo amara o tepe tire ke chimbure ti mane chanju sambajo a ke ba mabu shen de trup si ganju chane kale khana ri do yo he me vesre sogdo o ti inde o ya tejlania
So here also from Shantideva, he has a verse which says that recognizing that this path of bodhicitta is one of sort of joy, of ease, by which one is able to attain the supreme joy for other sentient beings. So here he says, who with intelligence would feel disparaged or feel discouraged at this? We have all of this kind of potential, and if we make an effort, we are able to achieve that kind of supreme joy. And so here, when it comes to a bodhisattva who is engaged in this path, they don't have this sense of their activities being something that is difficult. So the training in the bodhisattva deeds of the 6 perfections, generosity and ethics and patience and so forth, is not something that they see as something difficult. If we have this kind of perception that, oh my gosh, I've got to accumulate merit for eons and eons, how will I possibly do this? There can be that kind of sense of discouragement. But a bodhisattva undertakes these practices with joy. It's not as though they have this thought of, oh, how could I possibly remain and try to work for the aims of sentient beings for such a long time? But this path of bodhicitta is one that is uplifting. It is done with joy and achieves joyful results. So a bodhisattva undertakes this without any sense of this being a difficulty.
Oh yeah. O tie chi jale ba yabu do. Yinga zo de uma jugba na le yong do. Ka se chi der chi ji che da the sam les. Chanju semba to zo me shen da che chi ro ba che ro chi se. Chimba ta ro che ro ba che ro chi se ge je the so na che ra, tra de the so na che ra. Chi der chi ji che tra the sam le, tra de the ba sam se go ra. De ka wa ji go ra nga zo de tai ha cha ba se ko ya ro ba che ko se de sam gi ro Tinde samgewa mara. Chidari chinji se longe chile gan le rokwa chidi chi chiro se de o kada chugyo ra tra to ba samje. Chidari chinji chira to sam le se tra de to ba o ta nga le longe chile so nge rokwa chi kugap chi ra so samje kada chugyo ra. Chida to sam le kese tenju se chanju se bala tewa jung de che ra. Kese tenju te dar tum namla shiwar shube tewe chi me na se do. Par mebchas. Tedar tub nala shivar shube tewe cheme nasa. Oh, dude, let's marvelous.
Dice.
Give you a
Diksa. Konzo pari anji mare.
ale.
So here there is another verse from Chandrakirti's entry to the middle way, describing this same kind of attitude that bodhisattvas have. And he says that just upon hearing the word, like there's someone who's in need, a bodhisattva becomes joyful upon that. So for us, when we hear like, oh, this person might need help, or oh, we're going to have to do something, we might feel this sense of obligation, or sort of like, oh, okay, I have to help. But a bodhisattva undertakes these practices with just joy from hearing, oh, there's someone here who's in need that we need to help or to give to. They engage joyfully. They undertake these practices without any sense of it being a burden, but rather something of joy.
Oh, chuza. Tedar tub namla shivar shube tewe cheme nasa de. Oh, tayo mebchas part. Oh, tene karsare. Chandu wi jira. Oh, yeah, dude. Tedar tub na. This. Tedar tub namla shivar shube tewe cheme nasa. Ora, nyedu da ranjela soba tezu se wara. Konjo shiwa tarwa top sona. Pe tene tu kabu yungura. Da chinjene da pe le da nyama mo ge rawa meba. Pumbu dole che mo go ko le tar so samde. Nyedu tra chumba da ranje tra chumba tezu tambu tarwa top de se wara. Pe kabu yungura. O da ne ko ale chida che so sam. 다 레다 녀모버 샤와전에 껴알랑구메 라게 삼르나 신 예루 예일루랑 신일루 가랑 되바 티나 신체라 소소를 라와이버 차라 어디두잔다 대화 중에 텔레라고 제세 전주 선반 남라 트라트바 참지 텔레라고 했는데 대화 토그를 해서 와라 다 탐지에 땅에 따지 매치고 트라트바 참 많이 봐 코란 대바 요소 소바치 침바 땅에 저러 와치에 주나 텔레자 가와초그를 해서라 당보 트라트바 참지 텐데 가와초그나 아니 치수 대바 요소 깡tum는데 텔레자 대화 초그를 해서 그도 어디인데 전주 선바다 어디서리데 가와초그가 말와 최탐제 대원로에 땡기지시기도 대인도시 장장 검사도 빠루чел이야 가르 존나 대회 소아마도 용주매 차지도 와 도와라 주나 아르레 달레다 나조이네 가서래 소슬레진 제부메 바리 삼사르지 가에 요마치 가와셔지 소시 대교라 디데네 가서 랑부체든데 지네 코치 배 버루 깽게 버라 주나 그 대인도시 마도 동에 소리요 말해 먼저 심세에 그 빼닝도 전부라 어디인데 다단다 가르세고라서나 전주 선바 쪽에 신대 dro바다 데 토리아더니 대도시 코나기를 마도 동해당 직갈래 가나가 소화기 말해서 어디선자 거까지 내거나 가제 신들이야 가제 대고 마고 삼로코를 땅 말아 토베 주요는 대토베 적에 삼겨라 대 마토베 받을 강에 소르고 말해 샴뱅게 삼로 가제 좀나야 베테베 가신 또시토네 디치요라 야 어디실라나 야
So here, the remainder of that verse by Chandrakirti, he explains that the kind of joy that a bodhisattva gets upon hearing that there is someone in need, right, is a joy that surpasses even that experienced by hearers and solitary realizers who abide in their own peace. So, so what need to speak of a bodhisattva then actually able to engage in benefiting another being? So hearers and solitary realizers, upon attaining that state of peace, wherein they no longer need to take up and cast off these aggregates without any kind of control, they have this sense of having attained a kind of freedom from that. They are no longer under the control of their afflictions and so forth. And so for them, it's a great sense of joy to have attained that kind of peace. But for a bodhisattva, even just hearing that there's another being in need gives them a joy that is superior to that experienced by hearers and solitary realizers, let alone actually being able to go fulfill the wishes of that being. So a bodhisattva engages with what we call like joyful meditative stabilization. They engage in such a way as these activities are not seen as a burden, or they don't have the kind of thoughts that we might have of like, oh, well, this is just my karma ripening. I have to endure this, or I have to remain for a long time. Oh, I have to engage in this activity. Our mind, when we shift it, has the ability of great fortitude, of great courage, if we kind of shift our thinking. And so, however, long a bodhisattva might need to remain within cyclic existence, there's no sense of that being difficult. They undertake that with joy, with happiness.
야 어디인데 나라저거 개와투도 자 가시 트러시도네 죽고에 계신 분에도 준주식도 준주 거르마도 저기 개와를 투도 자 깔래 하나 저기 전지가 말아 가시 트러시도네 준주 저 정가 개라 쪼아오세 개와 제발에 쪼아들 준주식도 어디인데 가르이나 개회 자와 건드려 지라는 주고 랑게 주고 요나야 어디 유도는 좀 가시 트러시다 개와 죽고 요 삼상 삼로체 가베토네 무시 주베 qab래 뒤 삼로체 타 드사스나 어디리 아버지 소티 개와디 트투소아서가 가와다 제데 고기어라 제연안에 소소 개와 제발에 야콘에 콘도 페야다 소소 개와 제발에 고톱 체르 누르라 제 삼로케게 마다 제 소소 개와 제발에 개와 임바다 가와다 개메 도와체는데 땅좀 저치게 매나네 가르쳐 가르마체 매 아니 버루질 다 개게 제 중마송아섬도 최제 중마송아섬 대치도 남기 메제나 가서 도대 근데 조지바데 아디샤 이마티시도 가서라 날리다도 토바티나데 Dimi Kayana Chi Suda. Conja Mamuche Legacy, Kindu Sula Kanga Zenju Tikanga Chiwara. Nan Pearl Peros, Dimi Mamuche Legacy, or Tezukanga, Shan and Drea Kabuchi Grese. Kindungi Shabi Shuara. Or T in the Kokasura. Kinde Chavala Tumbe Kindu Sama Sanjay Temple teaching Tezukanga ko Shabdo Shuara, Tezukanga Ya Tunji Tugiora. Tindi Tinde Tunji Tugi, Samsang, Samluton, Shavena, Kawalam Shibusagiora. Or T in the Sunam de Saw Sagiora. Sunam de Saw Sana, and the Conda Jay sort of the Jogba Tiora. Yama Mabu Shake Ragila Madatinde, Shabji Mamu shoot, and it's a man that come check, Majuside, Chima come jetting Jogba talk with you like Sandra. Sunam just saw the Mangasana, and he saw the Tesam pay to Yora, or tea in the Karsura. Rangi Kawasa, what the Kawacha, you might read it all, rub the Chunchitane. Kawasa, you are awesome. Noah. And the Kandu can enjoy the Karicha and the Artery Chamba conventions and Ninja conventions. Tombani conventions, Chikomba, Pekaba Sambuchons or some. Toyawi in Samsa, Tirinimadi Abuchons or Samsa. Today, some down and the Sozo Gale Kawa Comeda. Kone Kodia Peata, Tezuya Yogara. Oh, today, some time, Tajanda. Kawa Kare Tuba in a Chanju Samba Javana Shingarazo Tanda Tende, Chanju Simone Menaya. Kawa Kare Tuba in a Chunduki Tona, Ragi Kawala Chesu Ranche, Shagi Kawala Chesu Ranche, Ragi Kawala Chesu Ranche Kuyorto, or Tendechin, Nirin Mezina, Tatri Kawati Tuachus Yawi Sam, Roa, Rab the Choa, Richinico, Rab the Choa, Tomatirin to somebody, and Titolia, and a country kitchen carcar, so carcel, Kawatendece, Chosu Yabuchus or Samsa. Nikawa Chebe Negam Kulun to the Aria Duda. Oh, Tisonza. Tenda Karishaverson, Nambag, Chanju Samba, Tendepe, Shirab Tarshimba, Tap Tarshimba, Tendeli Jurgo Ese, Jure Yore Titondalia, and it is Gona Changur Ese, Kale Kabura Shabuchi, Yoya members of the membership. Oh, Tendepe, Tawana Tawar Doala. Tene Tawar Doala, Semiusi Kilu, Takale Kabushuchi, Shirubata, Tradition Shavanashi. Kalseche Kobatani, Mengatembata, and it Tala Soba to the pen at Tony Park, Kalekim, the Sobol to Butrate, any I take better with the Tindemara. Samba Sambuch and Tibeta Agurmato, Soso Sobol Kalet and the Tibeta Yomarisora. Tina Shimo Gange, Palala Soba to Tibetados, Kaleshi Yora, Tibeta Yoma, Koranda Midri Yormata. Or do you do Kadu Simba Kabutone, Chong Jusum, Toa Tone, and it Chanju Simba Namji, Chungu or Chanju Simba, Yuring Bush to the Kalekana, Kone Yuring Bumades. Then they don't do all the same Sushi Kilu, Yuru Sheso Bata, Garanzo, Choa Candice, Lega, give our condition over here. Samba Sambota Kavetone. Oh, then it took Guyara. What is on the Chanju Simba Namji Zabata Rangaja. Kawa Kandru, but Choa the Mushi, Samadam Jelia. And then Kawala Kawe Chindikitone, Tuvachagism. Or did they Sanjay Jacoba Tovar Chevalia? And it Tobata Samba, Combe Remji June, Sanjay Jacoba Tobale, Paksha Shagi Isa, Never Shagi Isam, Semtendo, Never Kava Chugi Isam, Sabin Tabdiwara. Narazu Tamantas Tadur, Karsura. Namdita Tazna Yogua. Mishibe Mongba says so na, Tabe Shitsuba is. Mishibe Mongba Shake, they are Shirab Jagi Dora, Tabe Shitsuba is Suguda, Sabu Shaguara, Namsanda could divide the same between the Yagi or Mara. Oh, Tisonda. Oh, today, Takas, Sanjay Yakoba, Tobarchas, Tietandalia, and Etanta. Omaranji Tron and Sombala Soba, Tazuke. Tabtosola Tabata Saba Combe Rimni Junior. Sanjay Tar Sanjay Koba Tobachagin, so Kolo set and the Saber shoes. Those Mount Asa, I did it round to
Yeah.
go there. Yeah.
So Here, when we do virtue, we should undertake virtue with joy. I mean, we call the fourth perfection joyous effort, sometimes translated as like diligence or zeal, but really the definition of that is taking joy in virtue. So, here at the beginning, when we undertake an action, we should do so with a good motivation, with a kind of joyful motivation, not in addition to being a virtuous motivation, and carry that joy through the actual activity itself, and end that then with a kind of joyful dedication. So, here, when we think about the kind of joyous effort demonstrated by bodhisattvas, like for example, if we just allow ourselves to kind of like, oh, we maybe a little bit give rise to a positive, virtuous motivation, and then sort of forget about it while we're doing the activity, and then maybe are reminded of it at the end, it's not a very pure kind of activity. But rather, when we undertake these things with a sort of joy that carries through, that makes quite a difference. So we can think about the example of the master Atisha, who at Nalanda was in charge of very many things. It said that he had like 100 keys on his belt to be able to open different doors and do various activities to serve the Sangha. And for him, it was quite difficult to leave that in order to go to Tibet, but recognizing the benefit that would come for the Buddha's teachings more largely, he undertook that, not with a sense of how difficult it would be, but rather joyfully in the service of the Buddha's teachings. So here, by serving our teachers, by engaging in those kinds of activities, we should really feel a sort of joy in the merits that we are collecting by seeing that this is something that is planting those seeds, placing those imprints for our future enlightenment. And when we engage in meritorious activities, that actually helps to improve that collection of wisdom as well. So when we engage in whatever kind of virtue it might be throughout the course of our day, saying various prayers, thinking about love and compassion, if we have done things like that, we should really, if we have vows, if we are holding vows of ordination, taking the time to actually rejoice in those, feel a kind of joy at the practices that we have done. This is something that is very beneficial in improving and developing that merit. By rejoicing in our own merit and that of others, we really increase and enhance the collection of merit that we have. And so here, even if we don't yet have uncontrived bodhicitta, to hold on to that attitude in a contrived way and really try to carry that through whatever activity we are doing, not just sort of become mindless about it. But it can be for those who have ordination, or for vows that you have taken, to recall those and keep those strong. That is something that will, by rejoicing in it, enhance that, develop it further. So here, when we think about what it is to become a Buddha, it's really to take our wisdom to its culmination, to its perfection, to take that method side to its perfection. And this is done in such a way as going, as the verse from Shantideva says, from joy to joy. It's not in like those practices of some other traditions or tenet holders who engage in extreme physical austerities, like fasting, like relying on the 5 fires, like say removing all of your hairs, or doing intense activities in order to purify one's negativities through the body, because we know that's not how we purify our negativities. But if we are able to feel this kind of joy at the beginning with our motivation, carry that through the actual activity and into the final dedication of that, we are going to go from joy to joy. Even when we think about accumulating merit for 3 countless eons, we're going to be here for 3 countless eons. But if we are putting our efforts into the kinds of right activities, we have the possibility to achieve Buddhahood. So here we should think that may my virtues be like that of bodhisattvas. And here in the Pramanavartaka, Dharmakirti has said that when we even just eliminate one single, like not knowing, one single type of ignorance, we are placing the foundation for Buddhahood. That's how we develop, is by eliminating each sort of not knowing, developing each good quality. And with that kind of attitude, we should think that I am myself going to strive to attain that state of perfect enlightenment. I will become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. And in order to do that, I am going to listen to these teachings on the precious Garland in order to myself themselves take up their methods and in order to become a Buddha. So please set a motivation for listening to the teachings.
Oh yeah. So tanga to de sholoka ngapchunga ngate lepswa. Ta de karsora. Yala change lu yebaywa yala change lu bitanga kaba ser chimbite. Ta tele sabche mabushto ta te mukacha. Ta tambo pemeti lula lula chakba chir kaba setre do. Ta keba ta peme lu kare inaya. Rawa rabjung mala soba te de ina kebe lula. Kyanta kura. Yo tene keba ina rabtu chuwa pa ina peme la soba te zu lulia. Kyanta ku yora. Shenjan do ya tunda. Oh ya. Oh tene te karsdo sdo. Tene kawale so. Kyo ta nyeje shangji otere. Kyo ta nyeje shangji so ose. Ane kyo ta nyeje shangji so sosoro. Misang tonglen des. Ta tezo samba ngarazo namjune ko soso lu misang yimba teta. Kanga namjune tongde yora. Kyo ta nyeje rawa shangji so se. Misang chapsan ta chapchin ta ane chi kalu nablu la sokpa ta. Nangi nangja ta drameta ta tene chi sambane nima tabori tu kya sokpo tu chi chego yora. Te ko misang atuzo yabu taye tondala tu chi yora tu chego yora. Kyo da nyeje shangji so sosoro misang tongne nese. Ane chapsa tanga tuzu ro ura kanga tata te chego yora. Sa tezu kanga misang yimba ta baba ta tezu sama soso ngusumdu tongo yore se ra. Tongne nese. Ane te tongne ne te yu lu la chidaba wa tinde yon sakin chungo ku lu tili ya chidaba se. Yido wa nyido yur se. Te yido wa ta tila shencha chiya yo ma re se. Ta tunda ko keba ina pime ta ro tili ya chakpa shencha to ku yo na midukba kom ku yo ra. Lu ji kyun ta tezu samlo ta na ni paru chili shencha di pe pang ma tu na ko shencha chungru chincha chakpa meba chak yo ra. Ti tunda le rabdu chunga, so rabdu chunga tezu ki komche shek yo ra. Oh, ne trachomba rabtinde ina ya pe lu kangalim chakpa ina tezo pangu yo ra. Mata chidam milikati shek yo ma ra. Ya imbacha. Ne soso mezan tonne ne tindu lu la tin du beso ti kanga tso tenge lu ya chidabo na yido wa tonne ne tela shenja cha rigi ma re songo ra. Ta midubwa komba shek yo ra, rabdu chunga tsugi midubwa komba. Oh yeah, teach suna.
So here, picking up in the text with verse 155. So here, this gets to the subject of sort of refuting any kind of beauty of the various parts of the body. We don't need to go through all of the different subjects here. But first is a kind of general refutation of attachment to the body. Now, we need to remember that although this is speaking about female bodies, that is because this was taught to male monastics in order to eliminate their kind of clinging and attachment to female bodies. So this applies equally if you're a nun and have attachment to male bodies, or a monk and have attachment to female bodies, whatever it might be. The point is to eliminate the kind of attachment that one feels. So beginning with verse 155, it says, "When you yourself see the impurities of excrement, urine, and such, how can the body, being composed of them, be something pleasant for you?" So here we can see directly, I mean, our own bodies are composed of very unclean, impure sort of substances. We have to constantly clean our body in order to purify it, to try to make it clean. We ourselves see, we have to go to the bathroom at certain times. We have to deal with all of the various sort of excretions that come from our body. So if we recognize that, if we can see that directly, why would the body then from which all of that comes somehow be pure when all the substances it's excreting are impure? So we need to meditate on the kind of unpleasantness of the body. And this is again to counteract that kind of attachment to lustfulness for others' bodies. And this is specifically for those who have taken ordination, who are trying to get rid of that kind of clinging or attachment, as well as, say, arhats who need to eliminate completely any attachment to their own or others' bodies. But it isn't just in general that female or male bodies are bad for the lay community, but really taught with the purpose of eliminating that kind of attachment.
Oh yeah. That really chaba chirka batelia. Sholoka sumre chugudwa. Oh, that niba the lotion at you. The Karsi dosena. Tada Koan Dreba Yeshe, Nyelendele Samtangiora. Parado Lu de Tambuchaya, Nyelende, Kotama, the Shibichike Marese. The Pame Kudan Dubaletene Kigurava. Tada Koan Due, my Tada, and a Pai Koan Dreba Yesiwara. And the Sabian State Sabian Chene. So when Nyelende with the Tichiwara. Sabian Mesate, Mesan Richi, the Matu Tamake Marese, Kukurate. Mesanin Butela Tene Ludi Kiwi or Esera. And Suso Mesan Suso Station, those Ote, Yene Gute and Mesawa Chen Yungu, Tanda Koran, Mo Samlutan, the Teleten and Jungun, won't be Colatene, a Mayon to Kanga, Mesawa Shechi Yungu Yobanga to Hako with the Wasiguara. Oh, Mesan Suso Station, those Telan de Chachen. The Chen Kanshishas. Tell the Wajan Kanshi Chapari, the Chapari Mares. So Nam Dog part or which touch any associated Shenja Chamburiche, Yabutorgora. To the way nation of Koran nation, Samlutana, Chakwe, Cheke, or Mares. Misava Shin Kachiri, Kula Samlutana, Jungun Samlutana, Chilo Tenshab and Mesan to the top of Sokshu de Segra. At the Jungun Rabchiri and Teleati, Mesan Chimato. Kyo Marta in a social Namdopa, Shenja Chagio Resigora, your teacher.
So here then, the kind of general refutation of attachment to the body comes in these three verses, the one we've already read and the next two. And the next verse, 156, reads, and this is really thinking about then the substantial causes of the body. So one who, it is produced by a seed of impure essence, an admixture of ovum and semen. How can the lustful be attached to it when they know its nature is impure? So when we think about the substantial causes of the body is produced from the mixing of the ovum and semen, which are both sort of impure, unclean substances, as well as the kind of coordinating conditions being in the womb and so forth, lead to our having this body with the various 9 orifices and all of the kinds of various excretions that come out of it. And so recognizing this, looking at the causes that bring about the body, the kind of results that come from its essence or its nature, it isn't right to feel attachment, but rather it is our improper thinking, our kind of discursive thinking that projects there being some kind of qualities or something worth being attached to. But when we really reflect upon this, looking at the causes that it comes from, the kind of results that it produces, its nature, we can see that this is not something suitable to be attached to.
Oh yeah. That the Oma de Tachibare. Mizan Pumbu te langes or Tangazo Pagba de Sigora. So we Pagba de Kotan, King Rus the Samtandi, River Chanja to Samrotani, King Rus Samtangiora. And Nanja to the Kanga Kaga Samrotane, Nanja Kanga Misa Samtangiora. And Telepa Shai to the Bandawak, but in the Shubes, and Chilo de Pagba Yosha, and there is the Samtangiora, Shenjan Doetodal. O per me in a chebello let in the tower, Jeba in a permedio Shenjando Huyana, or in the tower Songora. Oh, the Mesan Pumbute land, yes, Mesan Pumbute Lombataga chatting a Papa Lombara Chendi, Cablo Longarazum was on the Shalakabisura Sigora. No, Tibulachi choose at the chick, now let's have it in a chilona teachigora. Tinashi resora. Mesan Pumbute land, yes, Lombachan, Papa Cambora Mara, Lembe, Pagba Yoba Cancer, or Timbesan, Rashi, Roberta, Shada Nanja to the Kangal Suchilone, Papa to Suyo Shabbat, Sigora. Yoba Cancer. Then Yawa Tene Perme, Chusu Kuna, or Teta Yamdo Tachi Perme, Kibata Perme, Yamdo Nyala Soba, Tindekablia, Mesaw and Jungu to Samba Chilia. 이 자르제네 녀다 부치레세 차파리 말레세라 녀한테네 빼매기 추수 공네 녀와르세서 추당 소다치 메상와 법서테서 온다 냠도 또아테니 녀나 시레서 어디실람네 그래 야
So, then the next verse reads, one who lies with this filthy mass, covered with skin moistened by those fluids, is doing nothing more than lying on top of a woman's bladder. So here, when we think about the body, I mean, we can think about like the skeleton, the bones that compose this, and we've been thinking about the various kinds of internal components, organs and so forth that make up the body. And then there is sort of this skin that covers that all up. So here, again, whether you are someone who feels lust or attachment towards a male body or whether it's toward a female body, reflecting in this way, we can see that all of the kind of filthy things that are within this is sort of covered over with this kind of skin. And really that skin is like moistened by those various fluids. It's sort of like a wall put up to hold all of that in. And so when we think about like lying with that, thinking about the skin itself is not even sort of clean, but yet it's covering up all of these kinds of impurities. And so lying with that, when say a man and a woman are lying together, is really doing nothing more than, as it says here, lying on top of a woman's bladder.
야 저기서 다들 내려도 아까서래 가도다 입을 잡아가봐 배매이네 배매기 깨바이네 배매기 가도다 입을 잡아가봐 배매이네 깨바게 가도다 입을 잡아가봐 이걸 거구라 잡아가고다 가고대래 저네 말 전체로 가셔도 와 다당보네 내가서 숙상와다 수행남세 다 가도다 입시도 가도 제보라 지어봤다 근데 입이 약고 여봤다 살바 입봤다 진짜리야 차네 차야게 요 말했으거라 제가래서 수상보이나다 수행바이나다라 개바품에 가리나 겜바이나다 셴바이나다 류메자 입봤다 런시 찍바데스거라 수상와다 수행남 아니 가서래 개남 야나 셴야로 peme sukun misana kyosha kebara kanle kese ta peme yina peme iti lula keba yina misawa chi chabari mares to peme yina kebe lula tide soda tele chabari mares o tisigdo peme ni kare sukun misana se ta chama misawa shechirese kyosha kebara kanle ke kyo chabaki de 연대 가르통에 잡아지기 어려서 잡아들기 말해서 거라 야 되지라나
So then it gets to another sort of topic heading, which is refuting attachment to like the form or the color, the shape or the color of a woman's body. And so one might want to think, oh, well, this is of a special sort of shape or it has a good color or something. But here then in 158, it says, whether it be beautiful or ugly, whether it be young or old, the body of a woman is filthy. So to what special quality could you be attached? So here, whether of a good sort of shape or whether it's beautiful or ugly, old or young, their nature is all the same. So again, whether we are a woman looking at a man's body or a man looking at a woman's body, examining it in this way, we can say that it's not right or logical to have some kind of attachment to it, whether it has sort of externally a beautiful shape or whether it's young or old, their nature is all the same of being in this impurity.
야 저기서 저들이다 가서래 야 저들이서 다니바디 시사 가서래 차관 메리보다 매버리 바세 근데 르리아네 신샤 메릭바다 근데 매버샤와리 버리서라 따티나네 차관 메릭바디 시도 디가서도 깨데 메자 카도 상세 미상와 전에 그 카도 상부 이나야 그 돌다에 그 마르코 미상와래 되어라. 신도 살라 이블레자. 다 미상한테 사바르세로 다치 로충주의 전부터 찾으시거라. 신도 사바르세 내 입대 약보도세. 지나 미상에 그 사바르는 인벌 개개 요 말은 미상하라 되시거라. 텔라 착바라 매우 따르세. 미상에 카도다 예비 약보 요나 사바르는 인벌 가리나 차바르 말아스. 대신도 내 뱀에라 소바 Kembada shambala soba karina sabada nyingbala soba karina keba yene peme yene keba liya tende chakbada yumare o rabshimu pa yene teme lula soba tende chakbada yumare segura teme sula teshino se sarvada nyingba taye ke yumare se kado yabu yabadan do liya taye tenda misawe rangshin kyare se kebe luyina tagare peme luyina tagare tiende kebala shenjan doko bata pemele shenjan doko ba yenete som tango de sungora ya
So the next is how there are two different kind of topics, and one is that it's not right to be attached, and then the next is this is something that is logical to sort of condemn or look down upon the body and recognizing it as being unclean. So here in the first saying that it's not right to be attached, it is not right to yearn for a pile of excrement, even if it has a nice color or is very fresh or nicely shaped. Likewise, one should not yearn for a woman's body. So here, if something is like, say, excrement, even if it has a nice shape to it or a nice color or it's somehow fresh, and this is, again, likening this to a woman's body, even if it seems to have a nice shape or be young or something like that, it's still in the nature of being unclean, right? So whether we are talking about the body of a man or the body of a woman, it is not logical to feel this kind of attachment toward them, even if we might want to say, oh, well, they have a nice shape or they have a nice color. Again, the nature of that thing is unclean.
oya desa o tie tanda ta chibari shita ya da kongru chiru bakbe yo sigura da chilo de ko bakba pa yo be sir na lo liya ko misawala soba kanga riba ta sokwa da tinde cha de sigara kongru se na lo sigara chiru bakbe yo se ronya de rangshini se ro de rangshini 신도 미세 낭신도 지다보나 통매 요새 미상의 랑신 바 남경가 중고 숨도 지 쇼치네 통대기 와라 현자라 중대 코티 통기 오마르 삼로 코기 오마르도 대성자 아니 신도 미세 낭신도 지다보나 통매 요새 미자와 가전의 통기 오마르 착배왕게 네 바 현자체네 티르에서 와라 착바르기 말에서도 야 티르게
So this is similar in the next verse. Again, why it's not logical to feel any kind of attachment. So while the nature of this rotting corpse with its putrid core covered with skin looks extremely terrible, why did the lustful not see it? So here, when we think about the body, again, it's sort of like a putrid, rotting corpse. The nature of the internal substances is something quite unclean, and that is kind of covered over with this skin. But the sort of putrid or unclean nature of that is something that we can see directly. When we see some part of our body, we feel that that is unclean. But yet, when lustful, when we feel this kind of a clinging or attachment to another's body, somehow it is that we don't see that. Our projections make it such that we feel this is an object of attachment.
오야 박바디야 미자 메서다 칠로 박바디 장만다 버튼데 게 말해서 다 나로다고 셰모고 셰세르시라 미자 멤버 말해 미자 레서라 가시도스나 박바디야 미자 메 레가 신도 두체나세 박바디 미자 게 말해 레가 신도세 돌로다 버치나고 레가스 돌로다 버튼데 레시사라 chilo tu no re tu lo pa yo sha ne chilo yo sha de so pa ke mar ba se re tu lo khalo ko ma ne she re ti so pa ke mar sa ma ro sa na so ra ndu che na se me zam phung bu pa pa ta ra shida bu na zam man jur se o te me zam wa te yo me zam wa le yo sha ge phung bu re se pa pa de se wa ra te ko tu lo na she ka le zam ma chi shen da ke ma re se me zam wa ge ti rang shi ti le pa yo sha ge te de chi ba che te ge chi ra me zam phung bu me zam phung bu kwa se to me zam phung bu pa pa ta se ra pa pa te me zam phung bu re chida bu na zam man yo ta pa pa de chi lo le yo sha ge tu lo na she re zam ma re ba se na o te ma re se go ra te ko rang shi de me zam wa te zu zam ma da ngo chi ba che she ru de che phung bu ten de tu ba she ji re to ra zam ma ke re ma re te me zam wa chi ba de se go ra pa pa te se go ra ya de de te ne de so
No.
oh yeah.
So then next the in verse 161, someone might think, well, okay, the inside of the body is unclean or impure, but this skin covering it, that's sort of clean. Like it's something sort of like a cloth or clothing covering a body. And so here, the response to that, one could say, in the first half, it says, the skin is not impure. It is just like a soft cloth. And the response comes, well, like a leather bag filled with a turd, how could it be clean? So even if someone wants to say, well, this outside skin, that's not impure. It's sort of like clothing covering this over. Well, if you have something covering over something impure, like a leather bag full of excrement, we would tend to see that leather bag as being unclean or impure as well. And so too with the body, the outside skin is itself not pure, but it also is covering what is extremely impure. So therefore, how could it be sort of clean or an object of our lust?
Oh yeah, that the member request do. Me sa lu lia member re ta nyang a ro tin de chen ya lu lia ke ba da pe me lu lia te ba te yo ra pe ma na shi de sa yin ma na shi de da wa ne shi chi tin de te ba te yo ra te ba re ma de sa member re se ti she do. Me sa ka we pum ba ne se pe shan she do. Pum ba chi ba che tin na lo ya me sa she ju lu sha ge ne che chi na. ane me sa ka we pum ba ne shiru tra ya me wa ya ta chilo ne ta du sang ma che yin da ka we ne na lo me sa lu sha ne de me be na re ma do ko chak be yu da tin de chang ma re sam tin de ka we ne ma ro wa se go ra me sa ka we pum ba ne shiru tra ya me ba yin se me ra ta ya re se ya wo ma re se me sa wa re se ro te ba te ya pe ma na shi re me to na shi re tin de se ma re se me sa wa ye ra shi lu me sa ka wa chi me Misawa ye rashin lute, misange kani misang kangan junggung, nalo yinge te chilo pakwa te mato, nalo misawa shaji kani ma te che tele, meba rigir mato tele tebe ne ma re se ora. Ya, tindi de.
So the next verse then is sort of why it is the body is still something that we should kind of condemn or look down upon. And this then comes in verse 162, where it says, while a vase filled with excrement might glitter, it is still objectionable. The body whose nature is unclean is filled with filth. Why is it not objectionable? So even if from the outside, as someone above was trying to say, well, the skin is not impure, it's something quite beautiful on the outside, even if we had like a vase that were jeweled and glittering and it appeared beautiful from the outside, if it is filled with something unclean unclean, impure excrement or something, you would then look at that vase as itself being impure. So it's not as though like our body is like a lotus or something, a flower that has come from something dirty and is now something pure, but rather it is in the nature of being impure. And no matter how you might try to cover the outside or adorn it, it is still going to remain in that nature. It's something that isn't worth our lust or our attachment.
다야 투스타 내디 락바디 어디 투스안
A problem with the iPad, when you touch the hand at the wrong point, it takes you to, you know, whatever page.
류니바디 야탈레 우레 쇼루가데 류니바디 쇼루가데와 카사 두주레 섬데베요
주주를 숨르시.
제소르바
나래. 가lte kyuni misangmu. Just trying to get the book back to the right page.
두주레 소리 딸이 하요르다 어디 안기데 토나니 빼야 로셔도 내디 어디 투샤래 두주레 섬 되다 내다 두주레 섬 가라 카도 가메나 가라
가lte kyuni misangmu.
티마르게 류니바데라
류니바. 가lte kyuni misangmu.
쇼로가 두주레 섬으로봐
나래.
이바 메릭바네 게데 큐네서 말해
라레.
게데 큐네서 게데 게데 큐네 류니바데라 오 메가게 타타데라고 투도
That's the danger with these touch screens.
그냥 하고 말해 따뜻해 에다가 니바 쇼가 조주레 숨으래
그것이 촌에서더라. 들어.
게디 어디래 데디스
가lte kyuni misangmu.
다됐어 야 저들이다 다들이 땅마트 집을 게데 큐네 미삼메서 뒤당 태와 사돈네세 장마 미자 제바가 류데 지시나 지실 메메스 메바르베 네레마도 때바르베 네마레스 다녀가도 된데 저도상 고때바도 마무체요라 어테조시고라 게데 큐네 미자 메세 게데 큐네 미자 메스 류데 지단에 고치나 가리나 미자웨랑 시레스고라 미자와 소자 메베네레마도 때베네 마레스라 지단 태와서 돈네세 지마다 제 사회 통화다 메돌라 소바테조 사회 통해 테졸이야 라과차나 네고 메자와 유도요라 네가사 장마 메자 제바가 륜데 지시나메 자가 안게메로 소진데도와 가다 사회를 지나 메타이를 지나 라과차 초마레 디스 라고르마도 라과차나 데마레 메 라과차나 쪼베트랑 따기도와 메도도 시나 메도 베오베 차마도 메도도스 라과데 팀발롬 된데 제쇼마레 티차나니 메자 제사레 어디스고라 아니 류디스고라 챈다 칼라라 소바 메도라 소바 장마도 졸라야 라베 레나 소바 찌기도 아시고라 어디선자시고라 게데 큐네 메자메스 코라 메자임바 메메고데 라과데 류디 챈다라 세다 메도라 소바 장말 레크소나야 Tia Mizawa Judo do Asiwara. Tida Tiwa Saduni and Zangma Mizachibana, Zangma de Lagwe Regular Soba Tuna Mizawa Redu, the Java Losset in the Sigdoa, or Lundi Chishina Mimese, the Ludi Chishina maybe Neres, Kora Mizawa in Bamase, Kora Shendal Zangme Kala to Lagwatuna Mizawa Redu to Asigore. Java Losura. We went to the ranching, but not just sometimes because there is a lot what to do the side. Oh, she records a halley, love of others. Oh, Jill Sigora, yeah, what is election?
So then we're now on verse 163, where it continues to talk about why this body is something that we should sort of disparage or condemn. We shouldn't see it as being clean. So if you object to excrement, why not object to this body, which takes pure perfume, garlands, food, and drink, and turns them into filth? So here, this is really there's a poetry and other forms of expression that praise the body, right? That sort of extol the qualities of a woman's body or whoever's body. But really, when we can see the truth of this, we see that it is quite filthy. Our body is something that is unclean, such that if we are to touch things like, for example, food, we would make that unclean. This is perhaps more extreme in the kind of Indian context, wherein you don't just reach into a plate of food and touch that food, because then that will make the entire thing unclean. And so there are particular ways of, say, making offerings of flowers or other substances such that you don't interact with them or contact them in ways that your body makes them impure. We dirty things with our body because it is in nature unclean. So here, when we look at something like this body that has that capacity through its contact with food or with other substances to make them unclean, why would we think that the body then is somehow sort of clean? It is filled with filth, and it's the sort of thing that you know, and we as Tibetans sometimes, like the Indians, are sort of amazed because we reach in and touch a whole plate of food, and that's something that they see as very much like polluting that substance. But whether our sort of Western tradition follows that or not, the body is something which makes other substances unclean. So why would we look at that as something desirable?
Oh yeah, this was
Mm.
yeah, that correlation. Solga to Judipsi. To Judaism, to Judipsi. Oh, that did it. To Judipsi, oh, did it. Somebody said. Ta peme je lu dan dawa rangi lu la ya misama taku re se gora rang kebare tanda peme se kansa chomba bo kansa keba yimbe chane rabjun keba chi yimbe chane she gora o te so lu de ya misama re se o te shi gora keba rangi lu de ya misama yimbe sam ko re se chitara rangam shenda ki misam meba chawar ta sa chitara rangda shenda ki peme la soba te su 류디 장마시 레 창지 착바치기어 말에 메사웨라시 레 착베네 마레스 셰바 따르시거라 에네 디시 란다 셴다게 미사 수소 지마메세 테네시 란다 게바 셴다게 르라 소바 카레네 테조 메사와이바 지바레 따고 레스라 미사 수 미사 수고 지메메스 메메네 레스거라 어디 계신분이다. 제 시계반할래 세버쟁구도 나와잡아게. 라게 르라 대신도 따고 그래서 단다. 뱀에 깨바이나 뱀에 르라 신장도 고요나 됐다고 그래서. 뱀에이나 깨베 르라 대대시 따고 그래서. 디 세버쟁이 거라. 디디 셰두서 어디 망보 용게. 때네 뱀에 르라 매바시 뭐부터 나려보다 제치치 말했어. 디 가르쳐래서. 디디 현장 넣고는 럽주 그 domba 송구요라 어디 된다래네 버절 현장에는 대견의 삼로단의 현장 마차로라 대다 개발의 뱀에 됐다고 말다 대 뱀에 장장을 르데 미사레스 메라 땅이요 말에 지단 뱀에 두자레스 계속요 말에 대 르리아 현장 도에 또다 고삼을 당고라 긴르 공발을 소바다 공바 택매 공바 카샤나 텐데 두세도 parts પાંચ મે ત્રણ જોને તંબો ત્રણ બતાને લ્યુજ સુપા રિવેસ રોસ્તો યા પે દેગરા પે ચંગો છપછરા છગરા તેજો કાંગા માતા સશોરા શંજા દોએ તંદારો શંજા દો કોંગેસો શંજા દો ગને તેલ તાક્યોરા મતે કિંરી કોંબાલા સોબો તેજો કાંગા tin데 전에 배 남산 좌중반에 신만주네 그 શંજા 된 도도 요라 까투 요라 어 되지라야 흔들죠.
So then next, it turns to how, in just the same way that we think of women's bodies here, because of the context, as being unclean, so too should one think of one's own body. So here, as it then comes in 164, a pile of excrement is objectionable whether it comes from you or someone else. Why not then object to these filthy bodies, whether they are your own or someone else's? So here, having objected to feeling some kind of lust or attachment towards women's bodies, it then turns to, well, your own body is also unclean, and therefore you shouldn't feel this kind of attachment to it. So again, we need to remember that the context of this teaching, it is taught by an ordained male who is helping others to keep their vows, right? With vows of ordination, it's important to try to turn away from that kind of lust or attachment to others' bodies. And so because of the context, we're speaking about women's bodies, but this is of course equally applicable to male bodies. We should not understand this as saying that women's bodies are particularly filthy or unclean or being somehow a disparagement of women, but rather this is about reversing attachment, getting rid of that kind of lust. So there are actually, in some Theravada traditions, when someone has passed away, they will show the body around. It is something for us to be able to see the kind of impermanence and uncleanliness of the body for reversing our own attachment. It's not specifically to try to disparage women or something like that.
Oh yeah. Tatama de Randa Shen Sama Kiba de Peme Karina, Misawa Imbati, Danda de Chiba Res, Sonsa, Tuchi Shidera, or Tati Ode Chitama. Chitar Peme Su Mesa, Chuji Lujan Tetandrasa, or the Peme Julu Misawa Shete, Tinashi, Mebar Chawa de Stalia Shete, Kiba Peme Sama Lu Chiba Resia. Tatanda Zomba Borang Sura. Soso ba peme lulu mezawa tange te sigora. Te dar peme su mezawa invitation de kyeje lu yang te dan ras. Soso lu te keba rang lu te ya te dan re sora. Peme chi kebe lulu mezawa tagi na kebe lu mezawa invitation do kera soso lu te mezawa re bandan re ta ma do soso sang ma che shenda de zokwa de tin sam ta yo ma re se. Li ne da chi ba re se. Shenzhen do ko ma gu chen ne ke bar pe me so so sam ta da ti ro o ti ri chi da pe me su me za che je rang lu te dan ra se o ti ri ti chi lam na ndi do ti ha ma gu ke me da ya
So here again, turning to this verse, and I'm sorry, before I forgot to mention that Aryadeva has also stated this quite clearly in his 400 verses, in that again, that is taught by someone who is a monk trying to reverse attachment to women's bodies, but this is equally applicable to male or female bodies. So then in the first half of verse 165, it says, your own body is just as filthy as the body of a woman. So again, with the author being male and having taken female bodies as the object, we could equally say that it could be male bodies that you have taken as the object, and so you as a female body would be equally unclean. This is, again, there's a purpose in trying to get rid of attachment.
ta de me da ta sim ba ne sa o ya ti de so te dan ra che ya ta de re te we chi da ro te we chi da na ni la de sa che ri me nam sa就算得到完了，去到哪里没掌握了，说不定这上路单呢，得到了呀，那学习吃过的这个嘛的是，这个没那么的吃过没这个说是真的吧？这个去到哪里了，都晓得了，没这他们是，我这就了呢，主持人啊，对吧？是吧？
So the second half of verse 165 then is kind of like a summary saying, therefore, it's not logical to have attachment to women's bodies or to any body. So in the second half, it reads, so it doesn't make sense to be attached. So doesn't it make sense to be unattached to both the external and the internal? Here, reflecting upon those things within the body being unclean, it's sort of outside being unclean as well. Isn't it right that we get rid of our attachment? So again, this is all about reversing clinging and attachment, lustfulness toward a body.
다 그래. 야, 다 간다. 다 그래 팔로셔. Magutane Sagba Chen Sigdwa, the Puga Lulia Puga de Kuyora, Igansora, Migi Puga Niche, Nave Niche, Naniche, Kache, Ravani, Chapsatan Sada, Tezuchen, Puga Duchema, Toba Popsa Kuyo Resigora, Makuse, Magutane Zagba Chen se. Tina mi ina mi gata mi chuta tinde sera kan nagu ina nabdu ta tinde sera sera kane ina soy chakpa ta chi leba ta tinde sab yora ani chapsan pa sa ta su sab yora jesu kanga kyen de chi me sa chu pab ni chang ma so gu yora ma gu ta ne za pa chen ta ni ngu sum chu che ga te me sa yong ge ba so so ha ku yora ni ne ma ta ba ri chu che ka chu nagu chu nabdu chi she go do tezu suzu ha kogu do wasigora magu tane zagba chen tani ngusum chuche kya ngusum do tone ne te changma sugyo resera ane lumi chawara mato na tanda de lumi chawa mato na ngusum do tongi te me chawa mare samne changma jeni cha do yena chola shebe chishi chase chola mituba kombe tinga je to shene tendo yong mare sigora susu ngusum do toya tezola ko changma 인신도 장만제 쪽바 인신도 장만제게 요나 일단 메도바 공배 깨르 공발라 속바다 속보디 파 시드데네 바페드라 pom보차를 소바틴데 마모 코메요라 미사 코메 루바짱야 같이 낭자 참아 소소소 같이 근데 코메요라 어때서 공네 메도바 코메 류라 상장도에 시도 메도바 공배 땡거지 시거라 어때서 공배네 펜도 용 말에서라 마고 당내 자바체 당니 무슨 추시자 르미자와 마도나 쿄레레 콜마리 쿄라 셰베 지시판세 아니 미도바 콤베 땡지 챤다 셰베 지시판데 판도 용 말에서도 야 디실라나.
So in verse 166, it then reads, even though you daily rinse off, then discharge from your 9 wounds, if you still do not realize that the body is impure, then what is the point of explaining this to you? So here, as it's referred to these 9 wounds, this is referring to the 9 orifices of our body, like our 2 eyes, ears, nose, mouth, and the various orifices for excreting our urine and feces and so forth. And so we are constantly having to clean ourselves, right? We excrete various impure substances, whether it's like snot from our nose or, eyes from our tears, from our eyes, our various unclean substances that we produce. We see directly that we have to clean ourselves off. This is something that is impure. But if we aren't able to realize that, even with this kind of direct exposure to the uncleanliness of our body, then what benefit can come from explaining all of these kinds of meditations on unpleasantness? So there are various meditations, like imagining the entire sort of world as filled with skeletons, imagining sort of going into your own body and seeing the various levels of how it is unclean. But if it is the case that we can't sort of be moved by seeing this directly, we are having to clean and care for our body to keep it from being filthy all the time. And if we can't see the unpleasantness in that, then what benefit could come from explaining these other types of meditations?
Oh, yeah, that is. That Pamela Tube Kansala Meba said today. Pamela Nyanga can't do Pamela Lula Soba, Ya Kibe Lula Soba, Tebatu Yorba, somebody, you might have Pamata Metot in the patient share. Oh, till a Meba Sigora. Pamela Tube Kansala Meritangor, Tube Nema Reser. Luigi Chana Sigora, Luigi Chana. Kanda Mizan Lundela and the Tochu Yanga Shibada. Texture you might have talked to talk about the Sunday, Yanga Ching with the Sunday at Tebatone. She would such a territory or Yanga Capture or to Sora. Tochu Yanga Chebanese, Pematanda, Nimatanda, that churches to this. Emma Sulum Emma learns. Oh, Tete Kubakas. Metan Melulia talk about Namdogia, and then Pematan Dawada. meto ubala soba tezudan drabode se ko chichur chebane ro ema o se sulum re se de ngocha meba re se keranti tsokba yimba tungwe ya mitaba ema o le se mishibe kune lambo ta lembo mishibe kune lana namdo ko chagbe won so ne tere ha to shinde tebere mado te tebe ne mare mebe ne re ta keba peme lu kare ne chibara o chichilana.
So then the next topic that comes in verse 167 is sort of condemning those or sort of disparaging those who would create poetry praising women. And here in the commentary it says women, but this, again, this is referring to women's bodies. This is not just a disparagement of women, but those who would, with their words or otherwise, praise women's bodies using various metaphors like, oh, it's like a lotus, like a flower, like the sun, the moon, these various things. So here in verse 167, it says, and the last line of this doesn't come in this section of the Tibetan, but I'm going to read it anyway. So some compose romantic poetry about this filthy body. Oh, what shamelessness, what idiocy. How worthy of people's contempt. So we went through what shamelessness, what idiocy. So someone who looks at a woman's body and composes poetry, sort of extolling the qualities of that, really, who could be more shameless? Who could be sort of more stupid, not seeing what's directly in front of them?
Oh yeah, mele tebe kansala meba sete shege batanda. Ema o ke teldoro so ati pet mishanda tende teba tebe la mishanda ke telgere sera. Ba ati ka telene mato tebe ne mar teldoro se chuchu tende do teldoro se. Tatena shite wama de chure. Mishi membe teba ye ane mishi membe teba ye semjen dine pecheri ase. Ta chik fuluji nechula soba tezo musundu tonde ba tezo yanko samlu tangjo chik namdo ba chotani ha chik shenda chik tonde yora. Mishi membe teba ye semjen dine pecheri ase. Debe tondo tsoy gyurba mizan tondo kinamshis. Oda te tondo liya mi keba chi pime da tende tondo liya kutsoba che yorno. Chi pa chi tsoba chone pa tso metimba chane. Kigenda kitu ina metimba cha pa tso. Nyebo namju nyebo ina pa tso tende tondo tsoba che pa. Shensha kiya te se wara. Mishi membe tiba ye simjen dine pecheri anse mangcha. Debe tondo tsoy gyubas. Debe tondo te chichichilu koyese, mara ngazo koyese, mara konzo koyese, soba yungo ra keba da pime tondalia. Nyindik cheyala soba tinde tondalia. Debe tondo tsoy chungwase. Miza tondo kinam shinse. Teko tonda ngone chane tsangma chike mara de. Miza wachi yone te tondali ki kanga soba cheche pe kyagre kyab tinde chigra o tede chikba re sere. Ya digre.
So then continuing with that last line of 167 and going into 168, it says, so how worthy of people's contempt. Someone who would compose sort of poetry praising the body of women or men, how shameless could they be? Sort of how idiotic, how worthy of people's contempt. Others sort of might look down upon them. In this world, sentient beings, obscured by the darkness of unknowing, most quarrel about what they lust for, like dogs fighting over filth. So, although it is the case that the bodies of others, women or men, are unclean, we lust after them. We feel a kind of attachment towards them. And this is really due to not something that is there, but our own mental projections creating something that is there. And due to that, we can create strife with others others in our lives. So sentient beings obscured by the darkness of unknowing, using their kind of discursive mental thinking to elaborate or to fabricate some kind of qualities that are there, they lust after various beings and end up sort of like fighting with others over that. It could be the case that a teacher and a student, or two friends, those who were previously harmonious, find themselves at odds over a woman, over something like that. So in reality, there is nothing clean there for which they are fighting or sort of in strife over. So it is like dogs fighting over filth.
오야 됐어.
Please.
다들이 페멜레 착바테 조임바 각바 하세더라. 페멜레 착바테 똑베 토다는 봐. 다 페메다 깨바다 가리나 펜주 시실 착바테 대외 조임바 각바 하시고래. 저래. 엠버 투나 대조르 바세. 네. 대외 엠버 메나 대사. 디신직된 된데 대바 메바 대외 대식도. 다 엠버스 단다 가서래. 다리지라. 제세라. 다리라. 그거는 제세 나서나요라. 강가마셔대. 제야 삼상 그 부부다나 그 투나 대화를 소개해서와. 어디서라. 엠베세 나서대요나. 팁도 부부다나는 대외 삼로 대화 소개해서라. 엠버 투나 대조르바세. 대외 엠버 메나테스. 엠베 나사 코라데 메나 텔레자 데르 와시고라 나사 체르바 코 나사 시 데투데 나사데 메나 텔레자 데르 와코 테네 추고 마레 데고 마레 코 당본이네 대와르시라 데데 나사 코라 둥에데 엔텔레 삼살치 팔라버레 투 부부타나 대완 중에 데시고라 대와의 주 소교하데 나사 코라 메나 텔레야 와시고라 신샤 코라 메웨이나 텔레야 그르바 케바 페메카리나 केबा पेमे केबले शेंजा de mena ane nasa khora meba na shire sora o tisu eba tuna te jurba teve eba mena dese nasa de mena yaushura tishin jigden dende dese deba mena teve te penji keba peme chabala sobati dewa songe de do ane nyokta mabu yora ye yena deba mena teve dese te deba de mena 대외에 대보로 안에 땅님 새끼 메테오 요마티 돈이 요타 가게 매매 차로라 어디서라 엠바투나 세데 빼차제 엠바투나 대저바 대외 엠바메나 대외데 디신직된 돈된데 대바메나 대외데스 어디슬람나 두라.
So here the next is refuting attachment to women, or sort of lust for others, as a cause of happiness. And this comes in verse 169. So here it says, if you scratch an itch, it feels good. No, so this could be some sort of like skin infection, or even leprosy, some kind of disease wherein you're getting these like wounds, and it feels as though it's happiness, or sort of feels good to scratch those itches that one might have. But it feels even better not to have an itch at all. So too, one is happy in obtaining worldly desires, but there is greater happiness in having no desires at all. And so here, when we think about this, again, if we have some kind of disease that if we like scratch our skin or sort of rub our skin, it might make it feel better for a while, but it would be much happier not to have that at all. And so too, we think that, say, attachment to men or women is the cause of happiness, and we pursue that. We're sort of even willing to fight with others to get that, but it's greater happiness to not have that kind of clinging or desire at all. It creates so many problems. To be free of all of those problems would be better yet.
Oh yeah, that got this. 어다들에 수바 메자와 공변 제부시에도 솔로가 등주들에도 메자와 공변 제부시 개바이나 페메페메이나 개벨류라 메자와 공변 신장도에 더 공부했다 담아 쉐바네 공부했다 제부가리 연구를 나시고라 걔들 대다라 다나 köse o te dare lulia ni kyan tu su takshe chen ya kumba cheba ina sura dosha trewa ma drup ja pe dosha da trene trachum bana shinda ma drup hina ya sigora o jan dosha saba yes dosha shenja de chongru do ne o tini te ka shenja shuksha butte de me cha gre sigora pe trachum bana tsawa ne yomo pangba te de me na sigora o te dara ta ne che dosha trewa ma drup ja 야 dosha saba ye peme chakbar men gyoro ten dosha de sabr chini chur yangbo chane ane keba ene peme le chakbar da peme ene keba le chakbar le saba tende meba gyor gire si gora o ti kombe drebu ti yung gire si gora o ti tangmal sheba na shi rabjung pombo tang ne chidang ne ko chachung be drebu top goyo ne tende kom gora ti meba soli ti kom goya kachike shegi omara ti ko shenjia yunge tu shenjia doye ko lyugi kyo samlu tangi yormada chidang kansa di tukcha re serab tinde ti ke shegi omara kya shegi omarta oti yang kaga chukri ya oti chilam dis.
So then, next in the outline is third, the result of meditating on impurity. And so that then comes in verse 70. So when you analyze things in this fashion, even if you are not yet freed from desires, you will cease lusting after women through the gradual decrease of your desire. So here, if one meditates on the body as unclean in this way, if you actually sort of think about that, even if you aren't immediately able to, right from the start, get rid of all of those desires, slowly over time, you will sort of reduce, make them thinner and thinner or less and less, and gradually get rid of that kind of attachment to, say, women or to men. And again, we are remembering that this is taught in the context of, say, if you are an ordained woman and have lust for men's bodies, trying to get rid of that is the purpose of using this meditation on unpleasantness. We shouldn't think that this is somehow a meditation that encompasses like thinking badly of others. We're not trying to, in general, look at others and think about their defects, but this is for the purpose of removing our attachment, particularly to their physical form. So when you have lust for someone, contemplating their unpleasantness, their impurity is something that helps us to get rid of that lust. But in general, we don't prescribe some kind of meditation just to think badly of others or something.
Oh yeah, that in it also the change tanga do the leg to kase shiba ngele ne bale but she do shiba ngele
이런가
다 가서래 단데 그 덤데 잡네 로 전에 가서래 신차데 코 도고 그 연계게 간사솔 쉐기어라 미투바 콤바 킹르 콤바라 소버틴데 쉐기도 나자 소소소 때다 아니 킹르 콤바다 시차도 풍부 로더 차선의 속보 견 쉐거라 담보 컨데 쉐거라 정차선에 때네 또 샤네 닝바 차선 배워줘야다 되니야 원보다 차서티 차거라 텐데 저리 담아줘야 텐데 담보 종사의 밤에 고단 되발 텐데 컨데 쉐거래 아니 아처리서 제철도냐 소고 차야 텐데 차르셔라 담보 종고 단 치마트디 텐데도 아니 르기 견데 삼을 당겨라 tenni pardo ko mesawen jungko rechire tele chakbari mare sere tende sewara o te ko chakban do kongge so kiwada rabjung pomola sobada rachung be debu top kongge ne tele shejawe ne ati ndo gura ta ti member ya tensa khashe tende ngudo nyokta rab che permit mandri ni che ne pe khashe kiwada mandri ni che ne samba thuk che ne meje sha dan zambulin le timado men samsa treje ne ko pet tinde yungdo tinde kable ne ya ko te kyon de samultana pengira o tine shi ko ban shi zambulin mangbo yore ko chira hale ke yo mare lu tinde re miche ba yabu mendo yabu che ma so sam kyengi chade samultana ya shinja do el pengira tinde shibu tinde shinja che ne pe lo le mesu tinde chone te kyon de samultana lu gi kyon samultana chakbe shi mare ko kya kara hale 대다 대삼사 샤다 샤틴데 요섬 틴데 삼도다 팽이라 카셰 삼도다 마시 티장자산 서버 투되게 틴데 용거라 틴데 매매 돈달이야 공부전에 뒤코메어라 지다고 랍도 중앙에 지나고 틴데 고 현자 지다 지 여자 뒷방자니 팽이 톱고라 틴데가 자네 매게 계시네 고빵 마방 당연시요 말한 팽이 도에게요 말와 그 매체 고라도 티셔서 빵하실 때네 어디 계신 분이라 랍도 중앙 고야대 가르에서나 다 단단 가지고 신의 좋아요 것도 아주 별반을 차시하는 세기다 소수 롱바데 쇼레네 지쳐다 대주 강가 매가 차로 아와 진대 롱바지데 고야대 pe 계신 분에서 산제 때부터 내내 직이 망보를 지조 망보 편도 중으라 모두 예례 토베 모두 라메 고바 통계 망보 중거래 타바 통계 중거래 상경계 중세래 매나 박샤샤네 빼야고 매일 잡불링 매일 랍자 망보 요라 촌알이야 대주 강가지 내고라 대주 내나 텔레 때장장 삼나 태바다 삼바 공부신 빼숑 짜침으로 나버리지나 대 참말베 티체나 낭미 좀 강가 카셰 때다 롱기를 마도셰 토비에 스메라 낭미 차주시 따주 따도 셰고네 때주 망보 때단 거라 아니 숑장장 따야 용거 말아 진짜 된다로 고야래도 이제 매제 롱바 춘주를 거에네 찔이야 대주 단계 장장 뒤장장 돌파를 따네 뒤주 깨지시 신의 숑자치부터 사마하고라 단다 베베나래 또사 공개 요라 간주 땡주 주셔가 강가 신경 망보 요라 강가 동부에 있는 지금 마신 시 강가 신경 천사 신경 요라 대공에만 별이야 쇼대랑 와서 롭죠 제사요아를 저부갈 시리걸 때참 두바체 대세지 겁나 검사 뒤주요아래 공회 통지 전다시계로 된대 요구요아래 된대 전에 단도보도 내라 자다 된대 매도에는 내가 가보래도 하셔 건자물이 날려 산제 좀 된대 따보라 주삼이 매켜버 랍자마 뭐 쉬어줘라 뒤께와 치마 장장 된다 말아 가시 어디 삼주고도 깨와 치마 낭바데 치마 상계에서는 지용을 엔깨와 치마를 지용 것이 늘 그에게 매서를 진 말아 sendel이야 소소 시딘데 남미 시딘데 점리 시딘데 오늘 된대 길랍자데 칠티요네 빼팽이라 딜로 좀 매봐 되겠다 때문에 간주 만주 가가 롭좀 지에 매나니 르다나시 따다 시나시 차도를 메가 딜레도 그러와 다시네 지게 사네 지세 마도 코시다 제게 말아 다 밀레 남조 여래 티지 잠불리 강가 대사 티치기다 잠불리 강가 매가 속에 애들 마음서 다 뇽바도 지를 아마다 상마 매버서 소수집을 내고 말아 강가 매어서 해라 때문에 진짜 중간에 뚫고 저래도 가서 잖아 거친 데서는 말이랬어 요 말을 시지 공부하라 미 강가 삼로 직 잠바다 짜와서 미 시칠이 잠들을 매나 안에 잠불에 빼 걸어지라 다시 창장 다시 장장 작을 잡을 두가리고 그라 잠불에 강가 지게 식사 지게 또 지gle 직 사와서 됐다 사연이 오면 사사말로서 마셔를 마다다 단다세에 세토에도 강가 쳐다도 제사 가르쳐 그래 근데 삼을 거기도 근데 저 거야지 스타 룩버지 가와내나 질 또서 내내 아우를 삼세되기도 랍지 상부터서 예로 말아 미럽네 미럽 주니지 요네 가지 팽기라 상바다 자신도 산제를 최소로 쉬되 대시소 벤 잠불리야 산제 손에 다 정말 고구 말에 시라 팬토 말에 소라 된 잠불리 메레 시럽 체 요래 딩아 요래 온부 뜨고 요래세 산제 손 샤바도 그 마순나 빼 방보를 가실 때 빼팬도 용거래세 송구도와 메토 빼말 쉬나 빼말 빼샤세 가실 추고를 쉐를 가실 추강을 쉐를 디나 시제 그 팬도 예선미 마무치 용거라 팬도 춘중 말아봐 챈딜레 때와 라간다 시디내야다 요가 침마 타르바도 탐제 침바세야다 근데 그거한테 사비샤스도 어디 공개를 지려 되어라 그 거자네 대송제 대장제 투삼고원 실내도 고요라 대지 여버데 빼 가서라 팬심부려 되어라 뒤에도 가지고 랍도 중앙절로 그샵체라 뒤에는 갬벌이야 그샵체 현재 겨와 망았어요. 현재 배로 좀 망았잖아요. 시대다 진짜 요하겠지 망아치요 그랬어. 뒤차내는 그 셔치요라. 다다가 스트레스야. 단리부터 어디지 랍단리스. 야.
So here, explaining the kind of meditation on unpleasantness and so forth, there's a purpose in this. When we look at where the body comes from in terms of the causes that create that, the sort of nature of it as it exists, and then what it is like when we actually have to die. I mean, there are not that we would see this as much anymore, where a corpse is left and they become discolored and so forth. We see what is actually going to happen to our own body. Now, these meditations on unpleasantness are taught for a particular purpose. When we have a great deal of attachment and lust, for example, toward another, being able to meditate on that unpleasantness is in order to reduce the kind of suffering that we create through our attachment to that, thinking like, oh, I have to have the kind of that person, or we have that sort of feeling of need for that. And in order to be able to reduce that lust and get rid of the kind of troubles that come from our attachment, that's why we are doing this. And so here, when we think about the kind of purpose of, and this goes a little bit outside of the scope of this text, but the purpose of particularly ordination and those who are really taking up the teachings of the Buddha. I mean, Tibet is in a situation where now they don't have the kind of autonomy to be able to preserve the teachings, but when they imported those teachings into Tibet, there was the freedom to create a flourishing monastic community who preserved these teachings. And these teachings we shouldn't think of as being just something for sort of future lives. There is benefit that comes from these teachings in this very life, let alone bringing sentient beings to higher realms, to the state of liberation. This is advice that is for the world. And when we think about those who take ordination, cut out those kinds of worldly aspects of their life in order to be able to preserve and carry on the teachings of explanations and realizations, the sort of practices, to have the kind of time to meditate on and preserve those teachings, embody and live those teachings, is something that is beneficial not only for them, but really for the world. This is the kind of advice that we need in the world. And we shouldn't look at the Buddha's teachings as being something that is exclusively for future lives, right? This brings about peace and happiness in the world right now. We have the ability as humans both to act in a very good capacity and a very bad capacity, right? We can use our intelligence both for the positive and for the negative. Like when we think about some of the things, like if, say, lions and tigers and such were in charge, there might be sort of various killing and taking the meat of others, but it pales in comparison to the kind of negativities that we as humans can do, like with the development of the atom bomb, for example. Like really, we should be like putting ourselves in jail for that. So when we think about if we use our intelligence, human intelligence, in the wrong way, it can be extremely destructive, but we also have the capacity to use it in such positive ways. And so those who, like you who have taken ordination, are here in the world preserving and upholding those teachings. This is something that is of incredible benefit. And the Buddha's teachings are so vast, and they contain the kinds of teachings that are necessary for those of different faculties, right? We have all levels of different kind of understanding and capacities within this world. Sometimes they give the example of the lotus, a lotus that some bloom underwater, some come above the water, some are on the surface of the water, and so forth. But these teachings of the Buddha contain the kinds of instructions necessary for all of those different kinds of capacities, for us to be able to develop peace and happiness in the here and now, as well as into the future. So recognizing, really appreciating the great benefit of these teachings, as well as those who, through, say, taking ordination, live and uphold them. This is why we show such great deference and respect to particularly those who are older, who have been in this sort of lifestyle and preserving and upholding those. And so this is a little bit of a side point, but having that kind of community who is upholding the teachings, this sort sort of advice that is beneficial for us in the present and in the future is something that deserves a great deal of respect.
Oh, yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Oh, Dina, some local I'm young at the Carsore. Then I Tembashida, Palamela, Jeda, Sanjo Sudula Soba, Sosu Tadwe, Dola Soba, Tezo, Yamlishin Gede Tale, and Barma, Sri Lanka to Yabudua. Kindu take her on loss, such as a pay Abudua, Tempe Abuneto. The Teba symbol to the again. Rub the Chua Chanja Yashu, Chechi, Temba Chanja, Teba Sambache, Tendeshigede, Kumburishidua. You might not purely pay Yapuyore. That is the Mihomarati, Indico. Tinsangazuti, Shengeto, Sosu Yamli, Yamdo Yamdo Cheworde. Militia, the package with Sarah. Chisodanga, Chekarun Jawa, the manna. Chidan Sabure, Saja Yad, and it's a pack, Omara. Mil permanent Pando man and Sabu in a Katamado. Kate Sabu in a Tipa Lela, Resta, the Partochi, Tima, Koto research. Shandal share the package bureto, Chisoda. Tinsandua, Kuga Yamudua, Rawa, Yavasodako, Chumbazo Lake, Lapse Chapkatagandron, and Dray over to the Shadua. What is the pay Aura? Me never of that can go, said that Chitawa Casigal, share Rawandovako. Namache would is the Lega Shakumarate. Nambe Labja to the Samutan, the Karina Shayora, Kolakangi to Karina Tima Chura Tayata. She loves the Jayora, personally, a wit in the order. Tezukanga Kaze Pena, Tipan and Diora, Michizo and allow it in the Samlatandachi and do some such Malawache, Len and Diora. Tiet the Soso Kapkabla Sosun Yamlichi, Ketchabura de Ina, Kapkabla, Shandal Shed, Ketcher Lebsaga to Yora. Tiet the Yamdo Yamdopa, Shalia, Michi in a Ni in a Kagala. Sanjay Tembe Chilam Jukes in a Medora. Oh, today, Chechonape, somebody lager. She saw the car on Javachesa. Rawan was the toast to do a share at the Kogabdoa. Oh, yeah, teacher. Want to share and Tagan Rivacha, Tiny Banga to do the Carsera. Shiba nearly Shabatera. Oh, Shiba nearly. Called Shiba Marta, Shiba Linka was hanging noise. Me have to. Linka was the Gazo Kebuta to the Neme Kebuto. Shingata to the Shensa Mambu says at Tavasi. Saya man, Yama in a Kokasha, Saya man, Link Gavin Sago at the Lenmara. Tavas says a quarter to church and that Gavin the captain to say at all. Not the way in Yato to say to Tavasi, it's a ling at Yagirate. Titondake man say to her. Oh, to Zutan the Kawyara. Soja Tavas, Kuyaya Cheche, Rita says, Kebuts of Dogua. Shina said, oh, did do the Kapasura, Linka said. Oh, Shiba Linka was, Soju Pangbas. The link the Janana Sochegura, that Jab to say, Chensa Segura, Sabadra. Oh, Tinma Pangbashita. Soju Pambada, and she had a Tapakiba Pamba. Cause with them, but Tanzania Kashedo, Tatambutin and Soju Pambas, Link Gamna. Rida Gamna Siranga, the links Rida says in rather. Oh, Tilia Jana. And then Soju, but Soche Guara. Oh, the Rungima Rese. Tambu Soju Bango, Link up to your mother, Link Gamna. Rida Gamna and Soche, or Soche and a pay Chambure. Tindigma Rese, Soju Pambas. Take us to those. Setonse, Rida Javena, and it's Seton Dura. Mission that said, nay, but it's a map, so Siena. It's a mamma, and so the Setoneda. No, Tanda Celebration, you had the Tindich, you see that. Setonse, Jigda, Tungeda. Oh, yeah, Seton do this, yeah. Celebration, the Raggy Sochi, Cutin, the Namin Jabulatin, Seton do this, teacher. And Jiba Maya Tungesha, and it's so Chena Pajoti, Rida to the pen, Jiba Jigra, and Jiba Jane Pai Tungechon to the Rally, Mahobana Tungemabu Yongura, Jiba Maya Tungesha. Oh, then Yawa, Jimmy Seba, Ridaling Goddess, and Yawa Kevala Soba, Namijin Debu Yawa Kevala Soba, Tinde Tiwa Mambu Yodese. This on the link the Gagores, Rida said, Gagores, Ling Gagba in the Tadavana Tato, Sumi Temperature or Rida Kemne, Simje Sam about the Tato, Subsoche, and the Sungures, so check it by your Mareso. Or the Seton Jigda, Tungeda, Sera, Seton Rode, and the Simje Dozole Jiba, Chamberkiri, Tesson, Mount, but around Tungema Yungurese, and then Namijin Debutilla, Yawakeva Yungurese, Neve Kuni Miseba, so Kimeba Lang and Mabusa Urese, Debuso Kimeba. Rida Ling de Tedavese, Rida Ling, Rida Sayate, Tedavena, Tadu Semi Temperature. Rida Seba Meba Maseba Session, Temperature Social de Pamba Jose, Tatunda Kuyaya Session Rida Get and Masiese, Pamba Jose, Tisha, Ya, or Tisilana.
So here, in terms of the abiding of the Buddha's teachings, we see many communities, particularly in countries like Thailand and Burma and so forth, who are upholding the teachings of the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, the 37 practices of Bodhisattva, or 37 branches of enlightenment, and so forth. And so there are many communities of practice throughout the world that are in that kind of Theravada tradition. And these days it's more rare to have those who are practicing the Mahayana. And those communities who are practicing and upholding the teachings of the Mahayana, it's important that they engage in practice, but also in explanation to others, right? If we talk about this Dharma and just say, oh, well, it's so profound, but it doesn't actually connect with the people, then its profundity really doesn't mean anything. So here it is important that as particularly as people who are in a country that has freedom, we are able to, not for the sake of like proselytizing others, but for their benefit, giving advice that is beneficial to them. We have the kind of freedom to explain the Dharma. Like we can even go into prisons and teach people the Dharma. And giving people advice that is helpful for alleviating their suffering is beneficial for society. It isn't something about like converting people to Buddhism, but rather being able to give explanations to others is the way in which we benefit them, in which we bring the blessings of the Buddhas to others. And so here, for particularly communities like yours at Sravasti, you should recognize that sometimes your own practice is important, but it's also as equally important that you explain to others, that you engage with the communities that you are around. Again, in terms of having the freedom to do so because of our political situation, and there are countries where they don't have that, and really bringing the blessings of the Buddha to others. So that is something important to keep in mind before we then turn to the text here, where it's going to go into a refutation of particularly like hunting, going after wild animals. So this is talking about, again, definite goodness and giving up the kinds of non-virtues, negative actions that are going to lead to bad results. Particularly here, it talks about abandoning taking life, abandoning creating fear in others, and really relying upon generating joy for others. So here, this is particularly referring to like hunting wild animals. I mean, in kings in the past used to go out on hunts where it wasn't about getting food to eat, but rather just for the sake of killing. And so abandoning killing is something that should be done because you recognize that you yourself will experience the ripening results or of that. The result could be similar to the cause in terms of having a shorter life, having someone else take your life. But when you kill others, like going after wild animals with an arrow or a gun or whatever it might be, you are creating the virtue, the non-virtue to be born in the lower realms, to experience more fear, to experience greater suffering. And so therefore, one should abandon killing, particularly hunting.
Oh, yeah, that's so cheap. Bamba said, do Saswa. Oh, that Jibakiba Bamba said, Jensen to Jibakiba Bamba, Shenaki, Rosso Second. The soldier Bambadeo, number Janaco Karina, so Checho Mardo, Shevshone. Simja Karine Checho Mardo, Diana Kasha, Nyada, Simjan Gashiti, Shebabu Yanchika, so the Sayato nowadays, Titibayo Marcel. Number Janity Omar, soldier Banchuna said, so in a Secho Marwa, Sechongeji Omarwa, Chuneshi Jani Omar. Diana Cocansa, so number is in a Kaga, soldier Bamaja, Nebata Omarwa, Kashetina, Chingeti Ungra. In a Chokorang on the China, soldier Bamba, one it's all Bambate, Karina, Simja condition is soldier, but show your mother condition. And I say, show the Ralu say, show the Sarah. Penangazu Berlin Lhasa Lucina. Shatsonge yor the Shatsonge Ralu Yad to say, Songe de Timado Yomare, Kajimato Musuman Mato Yomare. Shatsonge Kanga Sange Kanga Konjo Shatu Pachiore, Tina Konjo Aja Dozuge, teaching Shatsonge Kanga Permitanja, Musuman Permitanja. And you say get a Konjo Shada segment of Mishiti Hamawa. Konjo said Madu Sange Yomare Tonji Korana. That don't say no Kangali say Yimari Kaka so ya oh my baby just say take a cherry you know could take away but the early killing door. Take away is take away is Kashi Drogwata transit to the Simjan social say but the massive Shandan and Yun Siluto to Yaja de Agrida Siluto. Yaja there's a tissue and a chimney period, cause Simjan de Shag Ludi up in the pay on good and one of them to the charge. That teacher, or tea the Carsoda. Those Kebata do is at all. The social pambate. That's it, that's showing a little bit of social points, choice your mother. Mazuti, Nagita was shaggy. Those things, children, she, Sanjay Tambalia, Kata, Sanjay Kodo to the Shik Canada. Sabo Conjo Mare, Macuna Digger was in the heart, Mare, Congores and Gutua. Calling Yingzi Congores, Kunda Ship and Nata Koran, Mishibe one, the Congress and want the song, Chado Vishawan the song is secures. Calling Yingzi Congores. Mother Kolia Condorce, Captain said in the share of Marisokta, Pichana Sena. Tanga Miss Osoria, number in Sena, Kangachetu Vengabade or Marakashet. There's a round or the social bambot. And the Chugi choosing some Mambo Yungdaka. Kunjolia Chebet and Daria, Simjabes or Tai choosing Sarah, my hair choosing Sarah Louis. Tinde Chogi or mother. What is on the social bambot pickets about us? Jabu in a number in a number Jabushi Beneco Socha Bedua. Tim Shanda Karcha, the social measure. Teacher. Yeah, what is you love the
So here again, this is advocating abandoning killing, and for Buddhists, abandoning really violence of all types is advocated within the Dharma itself. Now, practitioners, that's a different kind of matter, but according to the Dharma, the Buddha Dharma, there's no allowance for killing. In some religions, you might see a kind of attitude of like, oh, well, the fish and the birds and so forth, God gave those to us to, as humans, consume and use. And so therefore there's no non-virtue in taking those lives. But for Buddhists, this is always something that killing is going to be a non-virtue. When we think about like abandoning harm, the kind of violence of taking a life, every single being values their life. And so there really could be no worse kind of violence than that. Now, when we think about, though, like say before in Lhasa, there were butchers. There were those that killed animals and sold the meat. But it was actually only the Muslims that would be the butchers in Lhasa, and particularly the Muslim women were those that sold the meat. Now, those in smaller villages and whatnot might not have had a butcher of that kind, and maybe they're like saying "Om Mani Padme Hum" as they do the killing, because certainly there are those that eat meat as Buddhists or consume it, end up killing, but it's not something that is allowed within that tradition. It's still seen as non-virtuous. And there were those that, for example, would take like the leftover sort of tallow or the kind of fat from that meat and actually make it into like a butter lamp to give as an offering, as if somehow offering part of that animal's body maybe should help with the non-virtue of having killed it. But we should give up killing in any situation. Like, as I often say, even if there were those who were destroying Bodh Gaya, who were destroying the statues and ruining all of that, we shouldn't get angry at that. We should rather practice patience, practice forbearance, as Shantideva has advocated. So there's never a situation or a reason in which killing or inflicting violence is allowed. And while there are religions that say advocate making animal sacrifices, like of bulls or other kinds of animals, as a Buddhist king, if this is what the recipient of this advice is, they are not allowed to engage in that kind of violence or killing, or particularly not just sort of hunting for sport.
Oh yeah. 다 니바 셴라 딱바게바 빵바더라. 전에 리다세나 고셴라 딱바게라 리다도 시그라. 어디 빵고래 생거다. 니바네. 쇼로카 데라 디주땡이더라. 야라 그래. 야라 탐제 미창외세. 야라 탐제 미창외 그베 주도 잡아다. 다 주도 주렵세. 네 야라 창마 탐제 미창외 그베세. 네 그베 주도 야라 창마 미창외 그베세. 주도 주디라. 주도 아니 돈 자다서 칸에네 그베르바 주도 칸에고 도땡여바 쳇텐데서 소켰네 도체 주도 버친데 소켰네 남자 공부하셨겠네 미시도요라 대준나 시샤브라 주도 잡아다서 가서 주 칸에 주도 버친게 도야 자용바나 시샤 갈라테네 르제남 Tragbar Joa Terengense, or Tragbar Joa Terengense. The Perichan is so good at Tamutolia. Yala Tamje, Misawa Kubase, and the Kanepe, so captures say 2 months on, but to call 2 or so cam Namsa, Chosukashan and Mitron to get in the order. Zabatarse. Kala Tene, Lucianum. Tragbar Joa Terengense or TWN to do the Sojawayon and this Simja Tagra, Shigra, go so jumps on then she touch over the Sira to do the Sojam Sora. Kala Tene, Lucianum, Tragbar Joa Terengense or Tinashi, Sojana, Simjana, and the Petinashi, Jibaki Grace or that's Angelius or some teachers. Or this of the Jibachimbuki Grace. To do the patient and Michi Sochayon and Jibaki or Nashi, and this is Ridato to send at the Nashi Jibaki, so Chiba, Kasura. Jiba Chambuki, Poyet on the social Majes, you are. Do matter, teach lesson.
So then the next verse 172 deals with abandoning creating fear for in others. And so the verse reads, like a snake all smeared with filth, poison dripping from its fangs, despicable indeed is the one on account of whom others feel terror. So using this kind of example of a snake that's maybe all covered in filth, and it is dripping with poison from its mouth, from its fangs. If it were the case that some kind of animal were in the grips of such a snake, they would feel incredible terror. They would be extremely scared. And so too, an animal, or like a wild animal whose life you might have in its hands, would feel that kind of terror. So despicable indeed is the one on account of whom others feel terror. When you have that kind of ability to inflict such fear on others, that you shouldn't do.
Oh yeah, that's Kawaki but Tempasera. 다 가와게 왔다 땡고래서 심정에 소체는 지고게 다서 빵고래서 가와게 왔다 땡고래서 들어 어디 말로 산지를 처리 전부 랑바나스 차르바 땅에 저 찜바도 저 팁소나 싱바도 빼 가보 연구를 와 어다 잡아 땅서 또도 야보 연구를 삼 가보 연구를 처리 전부 랑바나 싱바 남네 지다와 싱바도 빼 가보 연구를 하던다시 Garland tene lucenam kawan jua tere sangse. Garland tene lucenam kawan jua tere sangse. Tina shinsigura. Lucenam kawan jua tere choba sangbo. So choba la soba tere. Shoji choba sangbo tuzu tena. Ne tamje. Shoji choba sangbo chambada nyingje so chobangbo la soba tere tena. Sangma kawa yongya shirese. 진심부 탭선에 신부도 빼 가보용 그래 다던도 야보용 그래 삼 어때나시 강을때네 류체는 가wan지와데 추 잠바다 닝지 소주 방바 차도 청와 대수 전에는 심전도 빼 밑을 빼 가보용 그래 세거라 어때면은 신하게 거시 차위어도 어때실람는 인데스다가 셔셔나 야
So I think we can read this next verse, which says we should rely upon generating a joy. So in 173, when a great rain cloud appears, farmers experience much joy. So just in the same way that like a farmer would feel a great deal of joy when they see the rain clouds gather, they know, oh, I'm going to have a good rain, good harvest, all of that. So too, excellent in this way, excellent in this way is the one who on account of being is the one on account of whom beings feel joy. So those who engage in good conduct, who do things like meditate on love and compassion, have patience, have protection of other sentient beings, they produce a great deal of joy in others. So abandoning harming others, engaging in good conduct, having less, say, jealousy, less anger, and so forth in ourselves, creating the kinds of conditions in which other beings do not feel fear. This is the kind of being who, on account of whom beings feel joy. So we will stop there for today as the time is up. Thank you.
Thank you again, Rinpoche, for your straightforward teachings today, and thank you, Katrina, for the beautiful translations. Finish with some dedication prayers, and we'll see everyone next week, same time, same place.
May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and the spiritual friends who practice it, have long life. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of Lobsang's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the 3 worlds always increase. Idam Guru Ramana Kamyatayami. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their sufferings. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore.
Dunja Jema Jeyongen.
Recording